Hello and welcome to Behind the Bearcat. This is the podcast where the Northwest Missouri State University Career Services Office chats with Northwest faculty, staff, students, alumni, and friends to hear about their career journeys, how they got to where they are, and how they became Bearcats. I'm Career Services Assistant Director Travis Klein.
And I'm Hannah Christian, Director of Career Services here at Northwest. And today's guest on our podcast is
Shelley Riley. I teach chemistry in the Department of Natural Sciences.
Welcome. Shelley. Yeah, we're super excited to have you on today. Travis, I'm going to let you go first this time.
All right. So do you want to tell, so chemistry, we've had a couple of at least one chemistry professor on the podcast before. Can you tell us kind of how you got to Northwest, how you became a professor of chemistry here at Northwest?
Well, can I back up a little bit?
Absolutely.
Before that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
So not only am I a teacher here at Northwest, I actually am an alumni.
Yay.
So yeah. So actually, I started here at Northwest right out of college, and wasn't actually a chemistry major. Two things I had said when I was in high school. Number one, I didn't think I'd ever go to Northwest, and number two, I'd never be a teacher. And number three, if you would have told me I would have been teaching at Northwest and teaching chemistry, I would have said you were crazy. So yeah, so it's kind of interesting that I ended up here. But yeah, so I did my undergraduate here, and then did my graduate school in pharmaceutical chemistry at KU. Actually kind of took a roundabout route. I worked in pharmaceutical research and development for about 14 years. And then my family and I decided to kind of move back, a little bit better location, to being close to other family here in the Midwest and on the East Coast. So we moved back to this area, and that's when I saw a job opening within the department and applied for that. So I kind of became a teacher later in my career.
So what was your undergraduate major in, if it wasn't chemistry?
Well, first of all, for the first year and a half, I didn't really have a major. I was kind of exploring things. And then I decided to go ahead and declare medical technology, which you would know it now as clinical sciences, clinical laboratory sciences. So it was called med tech back then. So I went ahead and started taking those classes, and had a lot of biology, a lot of chemistry. Hadn't done well in chemistry in high school, so I was a little, apprehensive in getting into that. And I was actually in my last year at Northwest. I was going to get ready to go out and do my internship and finish my degree. And one of my professors here, Dr. Ed Farquhar, who I had for quantitative analysis, he approached me after I'd finished the class, and he said, "Well, did you ever think about being a chemistry major?" And I said, "No, no confidence whatsoever that I could ever major in chemistry." And he said, "Well, you should think about it." So I did, and I ended up changing my major to chemistry, which actually, in retrospect, was a good decision, because it turns out I faint at the sight of blood, and and so working as a med tech probably wouldn't have been, really hadn't thought through things a whole lot with that. So so I changed my major to chemistry. Finished my last year here. I was on the 5-year plan. And
high five. Me too.
Me too. Yeah. It's a common ground we've found in this podcast.
Yeah, 5-year plan. So in my last year, I guess I thought I would just go out and get a job. And I interviewed. I think I told Travis this the other week when he was visiting my chemistry seminar class. I had my first interview at Monsanto, and it was a complete and utter disaster. Of course, back then we didn't have really career services to help us prepare for our resume and getting prepared for interviews and all that. So about that time, I had another faculty member, a chemistry professor, Dr. Higginbotham, who said, "Did you ever think about going to graduate school?" And I said, "Well, no." "Well, you should think about it." So I did, and ended up, going to KU into pharmaceutical chemistry. That way I could be related kind of to the medical field, but I wouldn't have to see a lot of blood and other things that would make me pass out. So
Yeah, if you're
that's
So
seeing
kind of how
blood
I
in a
got
pharmacy, something's gone seriously wrong. So that's a
Yeah,
good plan.
yeah.
so tell us what the study of pharmaceutical chemistry kind of entails.
So pharmaceutical chemistry, so it's kind of a broad area. I I specialized in what you would call pre-formulation or pharmaceutics, and so that was really um, very early on. You work with discovery chemists who are synthesizing new potential drug candidates. Each of those compounds has to be characterized to determine whether it can go forward into development. Um, so we would do physical and chemical characterization, make sure they had all the right properties for the compound to be formulated. And then I worked with clinicians. Actually, you work with a huge team. You work with a lot of people, analytical chemists, discovery chemists, biologists, clinicians, toxicologists. You work with a whole group of people. Um, and so then I would work on formulating the drug to be dosed. So it had to be dosed in animal studies first, safety and toxicology studies. And then if it made it through all of that, you'd have to come up with a way to dose it to humans in the clinic and then go from there. So it was kind of really, I say pre-formulation, but it was on the early side of research and development. And so we we looked at a lot of different compounds and uh, characterized those.
So did you do that? You said you worked in pharmaceuticals for a 14-year span, right?
Mhm.
Did you do that same, were you in that same span for that whole 14 years?
For the majority of time, so after working at on the East Coast for 7 years, our family relocated to the San Francisco area. And when I went out there, I actually took the opportunity. I had an opportunity to do the same type of work I was doing in my previous job. And I thought, well, this would be a good time to kind of expand my knowledge and build on that and kind of get into a different area. So the job that I accepted was more a little bit later in the development stage. So still developing formulations for capsules or tablets, extended release dosage forms for clinical studies. But these were, phase one, phase two, and phase three clinical studies. So all the time that you're developing the formulation, you're also more involved in the manufacturing side of things and kind of scaling up the quantities for
Mm.
larger clinical studies. So it was a pretty new area for me. And so I did that again for a while, which is great experience because I think the you know the more you can gain in terms of kind of cross training within a
Mhm.
job, the better it makes you as a scientist. And so then, after doing that for about 3 years, then there was another opportunity to actually go back and become a director of a pre-formulation group within a company in the Bay Area. So I kind of took that opportunity to go back to that and take more of a leadership role. So.
Okay, this may be the best question I've ever asked on a podcast. You opened it wide up for me.
That's a pretty high bar.
Uh-oh,
Whew,
uh-oh.
are you ready?
Maybe?
I have a 6th grader who cannot swallow pills. Can you
Hmm,
explain to me why when I go to the doctor, there's no option for like a chewable, you were talking about formulation and
mhm.
production of those compounds. Why can I not get a chewable antibiotic for my 11-year-old non-pill swallowing sick kid?
Well, you
I've
should.
always wanted to know this.
Yeah. Um, well, so they do you would formulate a drug as either a solution or a suspension for younger children. Um, and that's typically done, and of course the challenge is to make it somewhat tasty so that
Palatable, yeah.
actually yes.
Mhm.
So some of the drugs can be kind of bitter, so there's a good bit of you know uh formulating that goes in to make it acceptable. um so an 11-year-old, at some point though, depending on what the so depending on what the dose is, it may be just be that the volume that they would have to administer as a solution or suspension would be prohibitively large to an older uh, child that weighs a bit more in order to get the right dose. So there just may not be an option. Um, I don't know.
Hmm,
Uh,
that's interesting.
I
yeah,
couldn't take pills till high school, so what I did, I sat
really?
down one day after school with a glass of water and a bag of peanut M&Ms, and by the
And
end
you
of the
Worked
bag,
practiced.
on that?
I could swallow a handful of them, which has turned out well because
Yeah.
I'm diabetic now and I take 5 million pills a day, so it's all worked out, but
Yeah.
gotta
Well,
gotta
there's
detrain that gag reflex, so just practice. Just get her lots of peanut M&Ms and M's and lots of water, and they'll figure it out.
there are also, and by the way, I should tell you that as a pharmaceutical chemist, we don't really call them pills. We call them
Right,
tablets or
right,
capsules. But
capsules.
um, but the other thing that for some tablets, if they're an extended release formulation, like so you take it just once a day,
Mhm.
then you can't chew those. So that would,
Right.
yeah, that would affect the
So,
profile. But
So here's actually what we did, Travis. We
yeah.
did not have the peanut M&M trick. So they were capsules with the powder in them, and I really like making homemade hot cocoa mix. And
mm,
but I eat it dry. I actually don't make hot cocoa with it. I
ew.
just eat it dry. So it's delicious and it has a strange texture. But I was able to like open up the capsule and I poured it in and she just ate it with her hot cocoa mix. So, we made it work, but
See, there
sure
you go. There you
I'm
go.
shook, Hannah. I don't know if I can proceed with the interview. Like dry cocoa, like
That
you could
that's
tell me
making
you
me
chewed
that's
on light
making me
bulbs and I wouldn't
thirsty
be more
just thinking
shocked than I
about
am
eating.
now. My goodness.
Oh man,
Ooh,
we
this is what
promised
happens as you
that.
record on Friday, folks. This is a
I
bad
know we promised it would be a good interview and then we
Yes.
destroyed
That
it.
I've heard, putting it into a little bit of yogurt or something like that. Dry cocoa is
Oh,
that's a new
yeah,
one.
that's
But you know what? If it works, there you go.
Yeah, if it works, it works. So okay, so I am also interested in, so you took kind of a leadership role, right, in pharmaceuticals, and then you made the transition to coming back to teach.
Mhm.
What Tell me about like that transition, I guess. Was it
Yeah.
hard to be in the classroom? Was it fun? Was it easier? I mean, what kind of mental transition did you have to make there?
It was completely different. So first of all, let me also tell you maybe why I came back or why I chose to get into teaching when I was looking, for kind of the next adventure. Uh, the reason I came back was actually because obviously here at Northwest, I had Dr. Farquhar, I had Dr. Higginbotham, and so many other faculty members as well as role models and mentors. And honestly, if they hadn't have made these suggestions to me and kind of given me confidence to go into something that I'd never would have selected on my own, I wouldn't be here. And so I wanted to I wanted to give that back and have the opportunity, especially after being in the industry for 14 years. I think I had experiences to share,
Mhm.
and I could come back and help students in their direction that they choose. Um, I also come from a long history of teachers. Practically my whole family went to Northwest. My grandma was a teacher. She got her degree from here. My mom, my dad, my two uncles, my aunt, you name it. They were all teachers. And originally, I thought I never wanted to go into teaching, but I realized that it's really something that I felt I could come back and contribute and be passionate about. So that's how I ended up here. Um, all right. So what was the original question again?
The actual transition of
Yes,
the
the
actual work,
transition.
yeah, of teaching.
Yeah, the transition part. So I think the hardest transition was not so much the teaching, but um, managing my expectations about today's students versus because what I was pulling from was my experience when I was here back in the 80s. And things have changed, students have changed. First of all, when I was a student here, you really didn't have in chemistry anyway. They assigned homework, but it was never graded, right? Your um, grade was based on 4 exams and a final, and that was it. And so it was really up to you to be self-motivated, do diligence, and do what
Hmm.
you're supposed to do in order to prepare for the exams. And so I realized, after being here, getting feedback from students that I think they expect a bit more now, right? So
Hmm.
uh, they want some study guides for the exam. We were never given that. They want, some homework to kind of offset their exam grades. So,
Hmm.
um, and the other thing was attendance. So I didn't take attendance when I first came back, and um, there were a lot of absences. And in order to do well in any class, especially chemistry, you got to be there.
Hmm.
So I had to institute after my first semester or two some changes, I think, to really make sure that the students were completely engaged, not just in class, but they were doing the outside work as well. So once I kind of figured that out, I was pretty good to go. And yeah, so just hmm, I used to go to a lot of meetings when I worked in industry. I was obviously active in the lab, but a lot of meetings. Here I've got my office hours, I got my classes, a meeting here or there. And so it was just my days just looked a lot different than when I was working in industry. And
Hmm.
yeah, so
I'm interested. You were at Northwest in the 80s. Tell us what was different then here on campus.
ooh,
Any major differences from your undergraduate years?
um well, the
Not
big
really, because
difference,
the high rises were still standing, right?
Garrett's
yes,
changed a lot, though. Garrett Strong is
or
completely different than it was
of course
when
the
I was a
Hudson
student.
Perrin. Yeah, Hudson Perrin was still the old original buildings. Of course, we didn't have the Center for Innovation,
Hmm.
back
Mm,
then.
true.
Um, the biggest thing that I noticed when I came back from a chemistry perspective is, you know, the year that I started back here in 2009 teaching, they opened up the Center for Innovation, and they, had funding to get a lot of really cool instrumentation. And so, the availability of that for our students now compared to when I was a student here
Hmm.
is just night and day. I mean, pretty much all of the instruments um, that I used in a research and development laboratory we had here. So that was really cool. So that allowed me to build the use of those instruments into upper level chemistry courses that I taught, and so that was neat. So facilities, instrumentation, a lot better. Library is still the same. That was here when I was here. Love the library. We didn't have a Starbucks in it. Uh, what else? Oh, I think just more so, I think the support services, like career services, and the university seminar that students have now to kind of get their feet when they
Hmm.
get to the university. That those types of support services um, weren't as predominant back then. So, but we still had great faculty, role models, advisement. So that part hasn't changed, but some of the auxiliary things I think are
Hmm.
that we've built in are great.
Fun fact, I also, Ed Farquhar's last semester, I think I took one of his last he was teaching physics in the summer. I took physics from him in the summer, I think my I don't know, freshman, like the summer after my freshman year. So I also had him as an
All
instructor, and
right.
he was still fantastic all the way up to the end of
Yeah.
his, after he retired. I mean, he's just incredible teacher. So
Yeah. 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 They were all great teachers. Um, yeah,
I
I
don't
still
recommend taking physics in the summer. Let me
Yeah,
be
that's a
clear.
little
Like
rough.
no,
that
no.
goes along with the hot cocoa. Like I don't recommend that.
No.
The hot cocoa is good, but yeah, that
It
was a
can be
struggle.
done.
But
It can
Yeah.
be done, but yeah.
How hard was it to teach chemistry? You mentioned instrumentation and labs. How hard was it during COVID to adapt those
Mm.
classes to remote learning? I would think that would be like one of the hardest things because they don't have the stuff at home. You can do stuff through Zoom and do demonstrations, but I would bet that's a really hard subject to transition to that. What was that like a few years ago when you had to do that?
Holy cow, yeah,
Do
that
you not want to
was
relive it? Maybe I don't know.
I um, yeah, so, yeah, I was teaching instrumental that spring semester, instrumental analysis, and we were about halfway through the semester, spring break, and then we weren't coming
Yeah.
back. So, what I ended up doing, my husband likes, he's a in his spare time, his hobby is photography. And so I actually arranged for him to come into the lab with me um, to videotape. So I would go over to the CI, and if it was for the particular experiment that we were doing that week, we would videotape the instrument. I'd give them an orientation on the instrument, its components, what we were doing, and from there they basically had and actually they were dry labbing it just by watching me because I would actually carry out the experiment there in lab, and he would videotape me as I used the instrument, gathered the data, and then I would send the data to the students for them to process it and do all the data workup. So that's kind of how that worked. And it was okay, but I'd rather not repeat it.
Right.
So
Another thing that I'm interested in, maybe not so much related to chemistry, more related to as a director, I imagine, did you have some hiring and firing opportunities, right, to kind of choose your team? I'm
mhm.
always interested in what what were you looking for in an employee? Obviously, they had to know something about what the job they were doing, but as
Mhm.
far as like qualities or characteristics that you think make a good employee, and how can someone who's interviewing for a job, this is like a huge question, my bad,
Yeah.
I did not do a good job of making it concise. um but if someone is interviewing for a job, you mentioned, oh, I had a complete failure my first interview.
Mhm.
How can you better prepare yourself? What kind of candidates do you look for, and how can those candidates prepare themselves to present themselves in a way that makes them hireable?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the management and the people aspect. I mean, honestly, the science and the chemistry, that's the easy part. Sometimes working with people and hiring the right people and, keeping them performing at a high level, sometimes that's the challenging part. So yes, I did have opportunities to hire and unfortunately, we had to fire a few too. So not a fun thing to do. But in terms of hiring, so um, we kind of look at the full package, right? Like you mentioned, obviously you want someone who's had a solid foundation in chemistry. Yeah. And but aside from that, that person's going to have to be would have to be working obviously with others in the lab, but also, they're part of that team that I mentioned, they have to work with chemists, biologists, toxicologists. They have to work with a wide variety of people and be part of a team. And they have to know what their role is and meet deadlines, because there's always a project timeline. Things are moving, and the next person can't do their part until your part has been done. So communication is big. You know, um, they need to be able to communicate both through emails, but also, you know, within meetings and be comfortable presenting their work
Mhm.
to others. They also, at least in the pharmaceutical industry, a huge part of communicating your work was properly documenting your research in your notebook. And that could be, I mean, that was important not only, you know, because you were going to use that information for regulatory filings, but you know, your notebook could be audited within the company or by the Food and Drug Administration as part of a, you know, a drug approval or new drug approval. So you know, communication, both speaking and writing, was big. Um, and you're going to find you know, you've got to have some foundation in chemistry, but the likelihood of all applicants having had experience on every single instrument that we worked with or every problem that we encountered was fairly low, right? So you're really looking for someone who can grow in the job,
Mhm.
right? And problem solve and, you know, get to a point. They may obviously there'll be some initial training, but someone who can go off on their own and work independently,
Mhm.
and then report the results back. So all of those things are pretty important. So when um, and also this was a biggie for me too, even when I got my first job, organizational skills, because
Mhm.
you're balancing, you don't just have one project that you're working on. You may have two or three different projects going on at once. And so being able to balance and organize your time management, all of that was important. So when we would interview uh, candidates, the best the best way to get a feel for can they do these things um, is to ask them situational questions, right? Tell
Mhm.
me about a time when you had to, you know, organize your time, right? So really, you know, people that students that go into these interviews need to think about examples of times,
Mhm.
not just say, oh well, you know, I'm hardworking and I am organized. You know, I'm a good time management person.
Mhm.
Well, tell us how you do
Yep.
those things, and that gives you a pretty good idea of whether or not you think they can handle the job. Did I answer everything in your
Mhm.
That was an
question?
amazing, yeah,
Absolutely.
answer. That was an amazing
And
answer.
I'm
all
amazed
those
I remembered it all.
and I would think all those things that class I came to talk to was a chemistry seminar. So students who are
Yeah.
graduating and going to work or to grad school and those experiences of hiring and being the person asking the questions, I would think is good prep for preparing people to go out and do that then, to tell them, you know,
Mhm.
sometimes the ability to learn is just as important as what you've learned because you can teach things, but I can't teach you how to talk to your coworkers just in an email or keep your stuff
Mhm.
organized. So I would
Yeah.
think those are directly relatable to those kind of seminar classes that we have a lot of on campus now. And I think those are really helpful for students to kind of the last piece of the puzzle before they got to go do it. They've had support, like you mentioned, support stuff's all over campus now, but then
Mhm.
those seminar classes kind of
Mhm.
hopefully they're in there putting the like, okay, this is why we did this. This is why, you know, I had to take a language class because I need to learn how to write. I had to take speech because I have to speak to coworkers. So it all goes together to make me the candidate that
Exactly.
I am,
Yep.
hopefully.
You want a well-rounded individual.
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely.
Yep.
Speaking of well-rounded, you're looking at retirement, right?
I am.
What is your next project?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I I'm kind of, you know, I'm one of these people that I kind of like to have a schedule. And so, you know, summers when we're not teaching, I like, you know, the first couple weeks, I'm okay kind of, you know, not having a strict schedule. You're kind of, you know, decompressing after the semester. But after a while, by the end of the summer, I want that regimen kind of back, my schedule. So I'm gonna have to find something to kind of keep me in a schedule and keep me busy. So I don't know what that'll be yet. Um, uh, my my first thing that I'm going to do actually when I retire is I'm originally from Iowa, and I've never ridden Ragbri. Have you ever heard of Ragbri?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Register's annual great bike ride across Iowa. So it's kind of been a bucket list item. So that's the last weekend in July. So I think everything immediately when I retire here in May, everything will be leading up and training for that. And then once I get past that, I'm not really sure. But
That's a pretty awesome project,
Mhm.
actually.
it is.
It'll
Yeah.
be an
Yeah.
incredible experience, I'm
Mhm.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. A little nervous, but yeah,
Well,
I'll find something. I'll find
career
something to do.
services offers services for life. So when you're looking for that next job, we are happy to help. So we help
I don't
alumni
think she's
too.
looking for
So
a job,
That's
she's
right.
right.
looking for
Well,
a
I
hey,
project.
was
volunteer opportunity, whatever. Well, we can
That's
help.
true. I
So
was actually that was one thing you said at the other day in
mhm,
the chemistry seminar class that you offer those services even
mhm,
to alumni once they're
absolutely.
I did not know that. So
I
I I
honestly,
am an
those
alumni,
are
so
I love those interactions because it's really nice to help students when they're here, but it's a different kind of interaction when it's professional to professional, and it's not as developmental. It really is kind of almost I see it almost as like peer to peer help, and maybe that's the wrong way to look at it. But I enjoy those because it's a different kind of advice that you're giving to somebody, but it's really when you hear that they get something, it's so reward like, I don't know, I get the most kind of yay out of those moments versus almost anything else is helping somebody find the management job or the next job or this company isn't working out. Work-life balance sucks. I got to find something else. Oh, I found it. Those are so awesome.
yeah.
So yeah, those are great.
I would add to that, that's a great point, the difference between the 2. When you work with, undergraduate students, especially, a lot of them have part-time work
Hmm.
experience, and they'll have projects, and they'll have things. But when you have the opportunity to work with alumni, they are they've usually worked at least long enough to have, like, a real sense of what they wanna do and what
Hmm.
they're good at doing, and so it's a whole different level of kind of marketing someone, right?
Hmm.
Students are so fresh and new generally that they don't quite have a really fixed direction that they wanna go in, and so it
Hmm.
can be more flexible, but also more broad and difficult to kind of find them a good opportunity, but alums, we love working with
Hmm.
alumni.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well,
Thanks for bringing that up. We never get
may
a
Yes,
take
chance
you
to
up on
talk
we
that.
don't
about
talk
that.
about it very often. Yeah,
You can come be the
excellent.
career services volunteer. We would love that.
Sounds good.
So, do you have any advice or words of wisdom for maybe folks out there who are trying to get into, maybe the sciences or teaching or, any you've had lots of experiences. So any of those, any kind of someone who's been there and been successful, maybe, words of wisdom for the next people coming up?
Yeah. So in terms of science, I think, take advantage of opportunities. So especially, students that come here to study science. Um, and this is another thing that we're a lot better at now than when I was a student here, and that is we have a ton of students that take advantage of summer internships. Um, and that's great for a couple reasons. Number one, obviously, it looks good on their resume.
Hmm.
They've got additional lab and research experience and bench experience. So that part's good. For a lot of students, I mentioned that, I'd never thought about going to graduate school. And kind of like my whole, torturous path that I took, I hadn't really even given it a ton of thought as to what graduate school would entail. Not, you know, it, it's a long haul to go through to your PhD, and research is not for everybody. It's you've got to be persistent. Things don't always work out as you expect, and so in order to know, you know, do I want to go just get a position working in a lab, or do I want to go on to graduate school or research? Doing an internship, especially like an internship, actually in industry and in academia, gives you a comparison of the two. And I think that can really help, or has helped a lot of our students, in terms of, okay, well, they like science, but where, what direction do they want to go with it? And the good thing is we have, and I think what makes it really easy now, are connections through other Bearcats, that are chemists. Um, we have students that have done internships at University of Kansas, both in the Department of Chemistry and Pharmaceutical Chemistry at the KU Med Center. We've had students. We've got currently 3 former Bearcats that work at the Environmental Protection Agency down in Kansas City. So actually, no, make that 4. 4. So our students, routinely get summer internships in those labs. So that's really especially if you're going to go into science, my best advice is to take advantage of those opportunities and try and see what you like and see what you don't like, going forward. And I wish I would have had that opportunity. It worked out okay, but yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being a guest. That was a
Oh, well,
great
thanks for having
conversation.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I have a whole new appreciation for cocoa now. So I'll
Yeah, I don't think any of us will forget that anytime soon. So,
Oh, that's one
uh,
of those buried gems, buried deep
yeah,
in the podcast
it's skeletons in the closet.
cupboard. Yep, that's
Dusty,
right.
dusty skeletons. So, okay. Well, that'll do it for another episode of Behind the Bearcat, and we'll talk to you next time. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, be sure to give us a thumbs up below. That helps out. Also, if you've not done so yet, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. Also, we'd love to connect with you on social media. You can find Behind the Bearcat on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Plus, the audio podcast comes out on Fridays on all the major podcast platforms. Thanks again for watching Behind the Bearcat, and as always, we'll talk to you next time.